Hello and welcome to Should You Play, where we discuss the best and worst aspects of video games and let you know whether or not we think the title is worth your time and money.
In this episode we want to focus on Obsidian's first-person space action RPG, The Outer Worlds. It was released in October 2019 and is not to be confused with the similarly named space exploration game Outer Wilds that strangely dropped the same year.
Creating a decent open or semi-open space RPG is no easy task. This was most recently demonstrated by Bethesda's Starfield that's had all the bare bones for success, but still didn't quite strike the right chord in a lot of ways. Especially with people like myself who are existing Bethesda fans and can't figure out why they did not enlist Obsidian to work on Starfield considering their experience creating The Outer Worlds.
To be very honest, all Starfield did was make me want to play The Outer Worlds again, and, like a wish come true, The Outer Worlds Spacer's Choice Edition dropped on PlayStation Plus. Annoyingly, shortly after I bought all the DLCs separately and wondered why I even bother buying games anymore in this play for access instead of ownership society we now live in.
So, while we patiently await news on the release of The Outer Worlds 2, following the hilarious industry-mocking teaser trailer shown at E3 in 2021, RIP.
Will this creature be in the game? No. Say goodbye to it forever.
Let's revisit the first game and its DLCs to mark the 1 year anniversary of the PS5 and Xbox Series XS port that just so happens to fall on this Thursday, 7th of March.
Well done. We are victorious.
Why stay earthbound when prosperity awaits you in the stars? Come to Halcyon.
Let's start by outlining the main plot. Although The Outer Worlds places less emphasis on the main story in favour of role-playing, exploring and gunplay. In a nutshell, the game is set in the far-out Halcyon solar system that is under the dominion of mega-corporations who led humanity's space colonisation and planetary terraforming efforts.
Lured by the promise of a better life and a fresh start,
Deceptions and lies.
prospective colonists volunteered to a 10-year cryosleep aboard two Halcyon-bound spacecrafts. The first colony ship, the Groundbreaker, completed the trip successfully, whilst the second ship, the Hope, ironically got lost in transit, and the memory of them became a myth among Halcyon citizens.
Hundreds of thousands of colonists left adrift out here forever. Just to keep
The Hope is eventually discovered adrift in the Halcyon system by a wanted rogue scientist called Phineas Wells. Phineas revives a single passenger, the player, who he promptly jettisons to Halcyon, and this is where your journey to save the other colonists in cryosleep begins. You spend the game visiting a handful of content-rich planets, talking, shooting and negotiating your way through most situations.
Almost every conversation is full of dialogue options that have a ripple effect on the world around you, whether it's a small choice that changes your reputation with any given faction, or a big decision that can doom an entire town. The game is very player-driven, and comparisons have been made to Fallout in its gunplay and conversational systems.
Which makes sense considering Obsidian are known for working on Fallout New Vegas. Although The Outer Worlds is definitely its own thing, it does have some recognisable Fallout-esque mechanics. How you draw and put away your weapon is similar to the Bethesda-era Fallout games, and the combat also has a similar vibe too. The dialogue system will also be very familiar to players of Fallout 3 and New Vegas, and of course come with their own comedic dialogue options.
I must confess, I have not been cleaned for far too long. You're sure this will... Oh, yes. That's the spot exactly. Why, I didn't expect you to be so thorough.
And that's not mentioning the random dialogue you can hear from NPCs. These are not criticisms, this is just giving you an idea of the sort of flavour you can expect from The Outer Worlds.
Next up are the quests. Parallel to the main story, there are lots of companion quest lines and side quests to complete, which are often woven together in some way and can impact your reputation with one of the many factions that you can encounter. All of which have their own motives, functions, political leniencies, interesting characters and leaders, and quests. Your reputation with any given faction can be influenced through your interactions and monitored via reputation meters.
Your faction relationships, in-game options and overall journey is determined by who likes you and who doesn't, so I would be mindful of that when making decisions that could increase or decrease your reputation with factions. Sometimes you might hate a faction and admire another, but it's still worth working in favour of the faction you dislike for the benefits you get and sadly crapping on the faction you like. The overall vibe of the Halcyon system is militant and hyper-pro corporation, which, alongside its corporation mocking humour, gives it an innate anti-establishment punk feel.
Rizzo's Lemon Slap. Slap your whole family tonight.
If you have ever seen my awesome favourite movie Robocop, then you will understand exactly what we mean. This isn't a new concept, but The Outer Worlds put their own spin on it.
It also reminds me of the movie Fight Club, where totally not insane Mr. Tyler Durden states that corporations will one day rule the galaxy and there will be a planet Starbucks. Obsidian could have just took this concept and ran with it.
People could be listening.
The Outer Worlds swaps Fallout post-apocalyptic setup for Art Deco in space. The visuals can sometimes look kind of oversaturated, but all in all, its vibrance gives it a unique feel, and they have somehow managed to create colourful planets while masterfully maintaining a grim tone and demonstrating a wide wealth gap in the presentation of settlements. It's disturbing that even those at the lowest level of hierarchy seem to support the system rather than rebelling against it.
It's not the best choice, it's Spacer's choice.
Moving on to the RPG mechanics, The Outer Worlds is stats galore. There is a lot of variety when it comes to choosing your character's appearance and starting attributes, skills and aptitude. Creating your character can feel quite intimidating since there is a lot of decisions to be made first thing before you know anything about the game.
First, you need to choose where to invest 6 points across attributes that fall under 3 broad categories. There's Body, which encompasses strength and dexterity, Mind, which includes intelligence and perception, and Personality, which consists of temperament and charm. As you can imagine, each of these attributes impacts your character's skills, connected stats, and what your character is capable of.
Next up is your skills, of which the starting levels are determined by your chosen attributes. You get points to allocate across 7 core skills: melee, ranged, defense, dialogue, stealth, tech and leadership. Each time you level up in the game, you get another 10 points to spend on skills, and once a skill reaches level 50, you can then choose to specialise in specific sub-skills that fall under a core skill.
Furthermore, you gain a perk point parallel to skill points every other time you level up to spend on things like increasing HP, carry capacity, damage output, speed and other. Lastly, you can choose one of 15 aptitudes, and to be honest, the small bonus they grant are hardly worth deep thought.
So as you can see, there's a lot of variety when it comes to character creation and role playing. Rather than having to choose a character class, if you want a stealth build, then you can invest in your stealth skills to improve your ability to bypass security using the specialised skills Sneak, Hack and Lockpick. A very useful build, by the way, considering how much loot and locked rooms and areas you will be cut off from if you don't invest at least some points into stealth.
If you want to be a diplomatic explorer, you can talk your way out of most situations by investing in dialogue skills. Dialogue skills include Intimidate, Persuade and Lie, and you can also improve your knowledge of bodies, tools and the universe through tech skills. Even the perks can support whatever playstyle you prefer, although it is advisable to invest into perks that increase your carry capacity and grant the ability to fast travel whilst over encumbered, no matter what build you desire.
There are so many different paths you can take, and it really lets you experiment with different character builds. Couple those things with the conversational systems that can impact how events unfold, and it all gives the game massive replayability. You are described as the unplanned variable, and player choice is a big part of The Outer Worlds. Another big part of this game is companions. Sadly for me, the companions are the weakest aspect of The Outer Worlds. Although the AI is quite impressive in combat scenarios, I really didn't care for the companions or their quest lines. I know that some people will adore them, but they just weren't interesting enough characters for me.
2 companions are gained on the first planet very early on as part of the main story. There's the socially awkward aspiring engineer Parvati and the roguelike religious icon Vicar Max, none of which inspire the same intrigue as companions in other games like Mass Effect and the Tales of and East series.
What makes companions interesting is their personality and background, how the character is introduced and what they bring to the table. The Outer Worlds companions don't have much depth, they're introduced through just speaking to them in an unsettling face-on Bethesda style pull-in, and their perks are nothing special. The companion quests and backgrounds are just plain boring, and the fact that Parvati and Vicar Max are often considered the best companions speaks volumes.
I excel at confessional listening.
Also, some companions are not even introduced at all. At one point, one companion is just stood outside of your ship, a total stranger asking to randomly join your crew. You know nothing about them, and we are given no reason why we should have them as part of the crew. There is a brief encounter with them beforehand, but they just look like another random NPC and could easily be walked past without a second glance.
When it comes to companion questlines, they are all uninspired. Vicar Max is searching for books. Parvati fancies a bit of Chun-Li and needs help wooing her because she's annoyingly socially inept. Obviously that's an oversimplification, but you get the point. And that leads us nicely to the next element of the gameplay we want to talk about, which is questing and DLC content. For the most part, the quests in the Outer Worlds are your basic fetch quests, do something with technology quests, or quests where you have to convince this person of something, all mixed with a healthy dose of shooty bang bang and looting. It might sound simple and boring, but trust me, it's actually not in this context. A lot of the quests and the world as a whole are filled with political intrigue or ultimately relates to politics in some way. Not necessarily a bad thing, but some people might expect more action and less talking and environmental storytelling.
This is the kind of slower paced questing that can be found in Skyrim and Fallout that Bethesda fans will be accustomed to. How much you enjoy the questing ultimately comes down to how much you are interested in the game world and whether or not you enjoy having so much sway over the outcomes. For example, one of the first main quests is a moral dilemma on where to redirect a power supply.
In this quest, you can either redirect power to the main city of Edgewater or to a group of deserters who fled Edgewater's tyranny. But this quest is not as black and white as it seems. Edgewater has a larger population, is disease-ridden, and by supporting the town's leader you are ultimately supporting the obviously evil leaders known as the Board, and forcing the enlightened deserters back into a relaxed form of slavery working in a factory.
It's sick thinking about working at the cannery. I can't do that again.
Furthermore, the citizens of Edgewater are just trying to earn a living and are unaware of how brainwashed and under control they are. If you direct power to the deserters, then you condemn Edgewater, lose access to the myriad of shops and workbenches, force a dangerous freedom living in wilderness on the citizens who did not want or ask for it, whilst being demonised by the Board.
Here, gave decades of my life to this place. I never asked to be liberated.
If you redirect power to Edgewater, you obviously lose favour with the deserters living happily in the wilds, who have no choice but to return to Edgewater, but potentially taking with them an ethically questionable cure for the disease that Edgewater is suffering from, thus saving lives, but handing the cure over to the Board, who historically withhold medication for their own gains. It's entirely up to you which option you choose, and it often feels like no option is correct, but the consequences are impactful.
Another early game example is a quest where you steal medicine for the disease-ridden and have to decide what to do with it. You can give it to the quest giver, who you are told is a known hypochondriac, give it to a random person who claims they will distribute it to those who truly need it, or you can give it to the authorities who will punish the quest giver for trusting someone who turned them in for theft.
Occasionally, you will come across excellent environmental storytelling. For example, in the back streets of Edgewater you can discover 2 dead bodies and a note which outlines how their father intended to take their mother's corpse into the wilderness to be buried, because he can't afford the graveside fees. Later on, you can happen by the grave and another dead body holding a shovel, which is obviously the father who wrote the note. It really makes you wonder who killed them and why.
Similarly, you will occasionally come across a brilliant memorable side quest that outshines the rest, like a quest where you happen by a family home and it feels somewhat creepy and uncomfortable in its normalcy. So you can investigate the house and discover a disturbing unexpected secret that we won't spoil here.
I love this kind of questing where decisions have real consequences, and the environmental storytelling is great world building. Although I tend to cheat a little and just reload a save if I don't like the outcome of a decision. The only other thing we want to mention is the excellent DLCs Murder on Eridanos and Peril on Gorgon that are included in the Spacer's Choice edition of the game. I won't go into too much detail with these since it would be a big spoiler, but I will say that the DLCs managed to spice up the gameplay, present new conundrums and add hours of new content.
Halcyon Helen has been murdered.
Anyways, let's move on to the combat system, which is first person, fast paced and engaging. Players can use various melee weapons and firearms that fall under either pistols, long guns and heavy weapons, which can be modded and customised. At workbenches, weapons and armour can be modded, repaired, broken down for bits, which is the in-game currency, and tinkered with to upgrade.
There are 5 different damage types available in the base game, which are physical, plasma, corrosion, shock and N-ray. There's also cold, which is similar to physical but has a freeze buff occasionally, and science weapons which have special effects such as the shrink ray. The weapons and armour don't feel that diverse. You will come across the same guns and suits a lot of the time, but the ability to mod them broadens the possibilities. For example, you might find a bolter pistol but already have a favourite shock weapon so you can mod it to produce plasma damage instead. Maybe add an extendo sight mod to add an optical zoom and increase accuracy. Personally, I tend to favour plasma rifles with extended scopes, but each damage type affects different enemies, such as shock and corrosion is good against auto mechanicals.
You can equip companions with their own set of weapons and armour to complement their strengths and cover any shortfalls in your arsenal since you only have 4 weapon slots. Aside from the usual shooter style combat, there are 2 things that make the combat system very interesting and unique. The first is the inclusion of a time slow mechanic known as Tactical Time Dilation, or TTD, which is comparable to Deadeye in Red Dead Redemption 2 and the Max Payne bullet time.
TTD is entirely optional, but is presented as a core combat mechanic that slows down time, allowing you to act and gain an advantage, reveals enemy stats, and it can be upgraded through perks and or temporarily boosted using consumables. To be honest, I often forget that TTD exists, but it can give you an advantage, particularly if you have unlocked perks that give you additional XP for headshot kills, or you find yourself in a very sticky combat situation.
The second interesting mechanic is one that spawns when the player repeatedly fails at something. The player can gain a character flaw which impedes the player in some way based on how they have been failing, but gives additional perks. For example, if you are continually damaged by mechs, then a flaw could pop up which offers you 1 additional perk in exchange for a permanent flaw that makes you cower when faced with mechanicals.
I always ignore the flaw system because you get enough perk points anyway and it doesn't seem worth accepting a permanent handicap. But I can see how this could make things very interesting and present new challenges. My only issue with the combat system is its uneven difficulty. There are some massive difficulty spikes. God help you if you accidentally happen by a primal beast in the starting area whilst innocently exploring. Also, the level of difficulty is much too wide between each difficulty mode. Story mode is way too easy, yet normal mode makes enemies bullet sponges. There's no happy medium.
It would also be nice to have more diversity when it comes to weapon choices. Just guns and melee feels quite limited, although they do cover a lot. And since we have started listing the negative aspects of the game, let's run with that. There is a lot of inventory management in the Outer Worlds. It's insane. You'll become over-encumbered so fast and end up breaking down weapons for bits really early. There are ways to increase your carry capacity, and there's a chest with unlimited capacity on the Unreliable ship. The perk that lets you fast travel whilst over-encumbered is a godsend, but it can still be annoying.
Also, the area maps aren't very helpful at all, and nothing annoys me more than useless maps in games. Although the maps aren't as useless as the maps or lack thereof in Starfield, Dragon Quest, Nier and others, but the Outer Worlds could really do with more detailed maps that let you place custom markers. Another complaint of mine is that when I first played the base game on Xbox, I had no issues whatsoever. Not a single glitch or performance problem. The game ran so well, but the Spacer's Choice Edition on PS5 has glitches, and it also feels like they have made some things easier. Not sure if they actually have, but it's noticeable to me.
A final gripe that me and Heather share is the underutilisation of the Unreliable ship. You gain the Unreliable early game and it's controlled by a very likeable AI called Ada. The ship acts as the game's central hub for the rest of the game. Our complaint is this: the game is set in a single star system with a handful of planets, so why can't we manually fly the ship to each planet or at least make minor customizations to make it our own?
I don't know if this is asking a bit too much from Obsidian based on their size and budget for the game, but the potential for the Unreliable is overlooked. It's basically a place to speak to companions, store excess gear and fast travel. This is the biggest oversight in the game in my opinion. I mean, if Ratchet and Clank are cracking time can do it, why can't the Outer Worlds?
You've tried the best now. Now try the rest. Spacer's Choice.
So, should you play the Outer Worlds? Yes, there's no harm in giving it a go. I hope we have given you a decent overview of the game's core mechanics and vibe, and if it sounds like your kind of thing, then good news. The Spacer's Choice Edition literally just dropped on PS Plus and is also available on Xbox Game Pass. If you prefer to own the game, then it's relatively cheap and you can choose to just get the base game and DLC separately later, or get the full Spacer's Choice Edition which includes all the DLCs.
Seriously, I am so excited about The Outer Worlds 2 since the first game represents my favourite sci-fi game. It's quite the accolade to get me of all people interested in an FPS space RPG, since this isn't normally a genre I tend to gravitate towards. But The Outer Worlds ticks all the right boxes for me. Although I do hope that Obsidian improves companions, the disparity between difficulty modes, and integrates spaceflight for The Outer Worlds 2.
Anyways, let us know what you think about the game in the comments below. I've been Craig.
I've been Heather.
This is Amalgamingle, and thank you very much for watching.